Today's salon is entitled Distorting Democracy, Narratives That Make America Hate Again. MediaJustice salons are interactive spaces where members and allies of Magnet can connect, learn, and take action on top-line media and communications issues that affect communities at the margins. My name is Angela Pelota, and I'm the membership organizer here with Magnet. And as a membership organizer, I lead the network's education and convenings, and really just work hard to grow our network and to continue to connect with other like-minded allies. We're really excited about today's webinar. Just to give you a little background on who we are, Magnet is a project of the Center for Media Justice. We represent over 100 social justice, media, arts, and culture organizations from all around the country. And together we work to advance a people-centered media justice agenda. And as a national network, we amplify local grassroots voices, ensuring the on-the-ground expertise of our members influence media policy debate. If you're interested in learning more about the network, or if perhaps you want to have your organization sign on to become a member, definitely please make sure to check us out at mag-net.org, which you will also see at the bottom of each slide. So let's dive in. Our host today is Aaron Ammons, and we just want to make sure we pass it on to give Aaron, to allow Aaron to share a little bit more about himself.
Well, thank you, Angela. Excuse me. It's my pleasure to be here today. I am a co-founder of the Champaign-Urbana Citizens for Peace and Justice. We are a Magnet member organization, and I've been organizing here in Illinois for 15 years. I currently serve as an Urbana City Council member, and I'm the president of SEIU Local 73, Chapter 119. My wife and I have been hosting a community radio show called Higher Ground on WEFT.org, and we come on every other Saturday from 8 to 10 a.m., and we've been doing that for about 10 years. We've been using the community media to push and win dozens of policy battles, and I'm honored to help host this conversation.
Thanks so much, Aaron. So before we begin, we want to make sure we share some logistical information for our listeners. Today's recording will be available to you all through our website in the next few weeks. For now, we do encourage all of you to join us in a parallel Twitter conversation using the hashtag MediaJustice. And just to let you all know, our attendees are all on mute. Towards the end of the roundtable discussion, we'll open it up to a dialogue with our listeners. We're having you on mute right now just to avoid some of the background noise that may be happening. But to ask a question during the audience participation portion, all you have to do is open up your control panel and type your question into that question section in your panel, and we'll make sure to let you know when your question will be shared with our guest speakers. So let's go ahead and give it a try. How about we have some folks do a little test run, type in a fake question into the question box just to make sure that's working. Great, I see some folks typing in some questions. So if you have any questions, let us know. We're going to go ahead and get started just doing a few introductions about our speakers today. So first we'll start with Tess Fraser, who is with Asada's Daughters. Tess lives in Chicago, where she's a teacher and a member of Asada's Daughters and heads of the curriculum team. Asada's Daughters is a grassroots intergenerational collective of radical Black women who seek to create and hold space for dialogue, affirmation, and the exploration of the different forms of Black women's empowerment and self-determination. Paige May is also with Asada's Daughters and is an abolitionist and Chicago-based youth organizer and is committed to a transformative justice framework that centers young Black people. She is one of the 8 delegates from We Change Genocide who traveled to the United Nations in 2014 and was the lead author of the Shadow Report documenting police violence in Chicago that was submitted to the UN Committee Against Torture. Thank you both for joining us. Our next speaker is Erica Almiron, who's with Juntos. Erica is the executive director of Juntos, a Latino immigrant community-led human rights organization that's based out of Philly, actively organizing intergenerationally and deportation and the criminalization of communities of color. She has been working on social justice issues for almost 2 decades, including immigration, education reform, youth organizing, women's health, and gentrification. In her spare time, she is a freelance photographer and a friend of some of our other Magnet members, Media Mobilizing Project, and American Friends Service Committee. And finally, we have Ramon Mejia. Ramon is an Iraq War veteran and former Marine Corps member who now works as a middle school teacher and is an anti-militarism activist and a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. IVAW works to build a service member and veteran-led movement that ends militarism by transforming themselves, military culture, and American society. Ramon is an active organizer and is a part of an interfaith organizing committee which opposes local manifestations of hate and racism in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So thank you, everybody, for being with us today. We're excited to hear from you. I'll go ahead and pass it on to Aaron.
Thanks again, Angela. And first, I wanted to share a little background for today's call and why it's so timely and important. So this month's salon is being hosted at a key political moment. This is an election year, and the political platforms have been teeming with hateful rhetoric. In the last few months, we have seen the hateful targeting of Arabs, Muslims, immigrants, Black communities, and activists. This kind of narrative isn't new. It is not surprising that the narratives in our country right now are being used to create a wedge among Black and brown communities and increase resentment within the white working class communities. So today we invite you to listen to our guests to learn about their work in Chicago, Philly, Dallas, and other communities across the country where they are organizing against hate. The elections are just one example. We see hate speech and hate policies targeting our communities continuously. We know that activists are fighting to shift mainstream culture and perceptions in order to empower the voices of those most marginalized. Together, we will examine the creative strategies that our speakers are using locally and across the country to fight back. So let's start by we want to make sure that we're clear, give everybody an opportunity to share what you have to offer, but we do want to be mindful of the time, so we're going to start off by naming the problem. So what is the racial rhetoric that you are encountering right now, and how is it being used to wedge communities of color and increase the resentment in the white working class community? And Ramon, why don't we start with you?
Yes, thank you. What we're experiencing right now is essentially a growing proto-fascist, like white supremacist movement within the Republican Party, which is preying on the vulnerabilities of the white working class. This is the same kind of rhetoric that was used by Richard Nixon in the 1970s, where they would appeal to the white working class using both overt and subtle, like racist appeals. They're teaching white people that the reason that they have problems are because of this community, and the reason that they don't have certain things is because of that community. It could be whichever community they'd like to say, whether it be immigrants, whether it be people of color, whether it be indigenous, refugees, and the goal of it is to wedge, create a wedge between the whites and communities of color. Essentially, Trump has, and recently has been able to effectively challenge and channel those views of the white working class. The white working class believes that that the political system is rigged, that it's used as special interests in order to essentially close like the factories and to lay off workers and to invest money overseas. And so they don't trust the political system. There's a competition between the various socioeconomic racial groups, whether it be jobs or government funding or schools or Trump is fitting into that.
Okay. So listen, I think everybody has a unique perspective, and I'm pretty interested also, Paige, in you sharing your thoughts on this same question, and to be as specific as you can, if there's anything in particular, any type of rhetoric that you hear that may not be as blatant as some people think, but you recognize it as sort of a hateful dialogue.
I am perhaps it's important for me to note that, like, I organize Black people specifically, and that I see the movement as doing much more than that. And so my role in this movement, though, means that folks like Trump and a lot of this racist rhetoric and this hateful rhetoric, actually, it's not that they're helpful, right? Of course they're not. It's horrible, but too often I'm in a position where I'm having to argue that racism is real, right? That it's still a problem, and that Trump is like proof that it's real, right? The fact that he could, that it less what he says and more that people vote for it is actually meaning it has a usefulness, right? It does something as far as our ability to. I believe in contradiction. I believe in tension. I believe in disagreement as sites of progress. And so for us to finally be in a moment in this country where it's like clearly we're not all on the same page, clearly this is not some happy colorblind country, means that we can actually start talking about then, given it's not all happy, like where are we going to go? And it could go either way, right? It could go horribly. It could go Trump's way, or it could not. And here in Chicago, I think Tess can speak a lot more to this, but there's a lot of rhetoric around, right? So it's getting hot now, right? It's warming up. It's a beautiful summer, right? And there's a lot of conversation on what that means, right? And this is where you start to see a lot of like young Black people are violent, right? And it creates a culture and a kind of environment where people are totally okay with there being more police around, right? It's understood as necessary because it's hot out and young people, like it's hot outside, which means the block's going to be hot. And part of that is real. There is real violence happening, but there's not similar narratives around. There's been a lot of shootings lately, a big upswing, and there's, I think it would be important. And what I don't see, though, is a conversation around why is that happening, right? This is a really bad spring and early summer because we just came out of one of the worst, like, neoliberal years ever as far as, like, what got shut down and, like, what happened in this city. Of course this is happening. And so it's as much about what's being said as what the silences are. But I think Tess can say more.
So, I wanted to go to Erica right quick and maybe come back to Tess on this one if we have time on that one. Erica, what about you?
Well, I think that we've seen this last year, what we call here in Philly, like the Trumpification of the nation, and that Trump has been saying some of the most hateful things that we've heard in a long time around immigrants and specifically Latino immigrants, and what we also see is that that's impacted local politics, and some of that racist criminalization of our communities of calling people rapists and murderers and child molesters allows for policies to be introduced at the local level or to attack sanctuary city policies. In Philadelphia, we fought long and hard to separate the polimigrantes, so the police and immigration would no longer work with each other. And then the ability to have somebody like Trump say things about our community in that way then validates a lot of the politicians who've been waiting for an opportunity to attack. Essentially, it's to have the over-policing of our community, the detention and deportation of our folks. And so, like, even most recently, there was a bill that was introduced at the state level to take funds away from local politics and from local municipalities that had sanctuary city policies. The bill was called an alien invasion bill, and the rhetoric is exactly what Trump has been spitting out at the national level. And when we took community members, mothers, children, senior citizens, to meet with one of the local elected politicians who was introducing it, she was so afraid of us, literally was like trembling, called security and was escorted out of her office, and also then later on said that she was frightful of our presence in her office. And so when I think about what's this divide, I think it's the more that you can criminalize communities of color, the more you can make people fearful and think that it is okay to over-police, over-incarcerate, and detain and deport our communities.
Well, you know, this is my wife is a state representative here, and she was just telling me about the same bill that just came up in Illinois. So it's good to be able to see across the country where whether it's local, at the city level, municipalities, or at the state level, you'll see these things try to sweep across the country. But I think the organizing does the same thing, right? We have an opportunity to sweep across the country as well. So the super predator language that was mentioned years ago by Hillary Clinton feeds right into this same thing. So Tess, I wanted to ask you, I want to kind of move into, because our first question and second question kind of got meshed together here, but I wanted to ask you, Tess, what are some of the roots of the racist narratives? Where do they come from? When have we seen them before? So if you want to kind of tie those two things together, if you wanted to speak to the first question a little bit and tie this one in the way Ramon did, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to uplift the fact that we have Trump and this racist rhetoric in a moment when we've just had our first black president and in a moment when black people are saying that our lives matter. And so I would like us, if it's possible, if we're talking about racist rhetoric, to really understand the ways in which anti-blackness is at the root of all this racist rhetoric, and that the language that we hear around Latino communities and that's anti-Muslim is directly invoking anti-blackness, especially in the ways in which we use criminalization to justify, building walls and all whatever bullshit Trump is preaching at people, right? And so Echo Page, like I organize Black community and for Black liberation with the understanding that when Black people are free, that we all will be free, and that also that anti-Blackness and anti-Blackness rhetoric is prevalent in brown communities, in Latino communities. And so, I don't know if that gets to the answer of your question, but a lot of the root and the historic root of this racist rhetoric is rooted in anti-Blackness, in the foundation of this country, which is anti-Black, which is rooted in not just in capitalism, right? That we know that we had Arabs who were trading in Black African slaves with using the same language around Black being other, Black not having access to personhood. And so, I would just like to uplift that. And when we're talking about racist rhetoric against people of color, like that we have an understanding in the ways in which the racist rhetoric and the racism that Black people receive is particularly different than other groups. And that other groups, particularly in the United States, when they're met with racism, it's coming directly stemming from anti-Blackness, right? And what it means to not have claims to personhood.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very interesting response. And so if any of the other panelists, maybe Ramon or Erica, wanted to respond to that, just either one of you.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I don't think we could agree more. I think that we also know that there's a lot of work to do in all of our communities, and that anti-Blackness has stemmed across the continent. And so people are bringing some of that with them when they're here. And also that what we see about the hypercriminalization is a direct result of the anti-Blackness that's in the history of the U.S. And so I think it's on us to also do the work to ensure that we're bridging some of those things, and like to be clear that like citizenship for Latinos and for Latino immigrants is not the answer to liberation, which is I think what you see a lot in other immigrant rights movements, as it hasn't been the solution that we've seen for liberation either for African Americans in this country. And so we need to be thinking about broader solutions, not just get out the votes or just citizenship. It's larger than that.
Ramon, hearing the answer from Tess that also invoked the Arab slave trade and stuff like that, as a Muslim, what would you say to that?
I mean, absolutely. It's it's pertinent to the discussion because you have when we're talking about Muslim issues here in the United States, it's always kind of the idea that we're talking about Arab or South Asian Muslims, but people forget that Black Muslims have existed here in the United States, have lived in the United States since its inception, and we have this idea that within the Muslim community that you have anti-black racism that's going on. It needs to be addressed. You have, there's organizations like Muslim ARC that works to address anti-black rhetoric within the Muslim community. And we have, as a community, a lot that needs to be addressed as well when it comes to, anti-black racism.
So I think it's really interesting that we all have, coming from various different angles here to be able to have this discussion. And it leads right into the third question. And Paige, I wanted you to kind of start us off with the answer to this question. As we think about taking action and creating change, what tools and tactics is your organization or the movement using to disrupt the racist rhetoric?
Everything that we can do, right? So Assata's Daughters specifically is a intergenerational collective, and so we're known, we get seen a lot as adults or like older people who engage in civil disobedience, and that's real, and we do that. But our long-term goal, right, like our actual project, is one of trying to organize people as young as 6 years old to develop the skills and the analysis necessary to be involved in this movement for the long term, and to be involved in ways that are effective and powerful. And so we do a lot of political education and long-term leadership development of young Black girls and women. And we do so in ways that are about Black liberation, that at the same time are trying to question this idea of like what Black womanhood is and what it is not, and what power we can find in that. And I think why we're invited on this call, right, is because of our work with By Anita, which involved our 6-year-olds in ways that didn't tokenize them, right, where we weren't having them like pretend to lead marches, right? We engaged them in meaningful ways that matched where they're at, and we did this work in a way that was effective and that got Anita Alvarez effectively voted out of office, but without endorsing another candidate. And so we do this work in ways that don't say like this person is the racist, this person because they're Black or because they're better is not racist. We don't like the state's attorney position is racist, is anti-Black, and no one that you put in that position is going to lead to Black liberation. What we can do though is we can hold people accountable for their blatant disregard for Black lives, and we can do so in a way that engages our people as young as 6 years old. And so that's the kind of work that we're doing. You have to be really creative. We don't do it with a lot of money, and we don't do it in ways that we do our best to reject respectability politics. And we're figuring, to be very honest, like we're figuring it out. We're doing.
Well, I think that what you're sharing from the organizing perspective is something that's very key. Something that was said to me recently and reminded me of some other earlier lessons is that we don't organize events. We have events to organize, right? So we're not just doing this to have an event. You're trying to teach, and what you're saying about 6-year-olds and other people. I think you're raising a very important question about the state's attorney's office, something that we're dealing with here locally in Champaign-Urbana, about the office itself, which is another conversation, but I thought it was a good point for you to raise. What about you, Ramon? What are you guys doing to interrupt this racist rhetoric?
The way that we have to, address and to kind of, engage with this racial rhetoric that's being used in the elections and in our society is to tell our stories. We need to be able to first have the moral kind of courage to hold our loved ones accountable when they use hateful rhetoric. It starts at home to make sure that that we're not continuing the same prejudices that have been going on through the generations. And we also have to be able to tell our stories. It's not, as I heard before, it's not just about what stories are being told, but it's actually who's telling them, right? We have to be able to address the fact that there's a deliberate and unconscious dehumanization in the portrayal of communities of color, whether they be Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, that corporate media, film, television is used as a vehicle to tell a certain narrative, and we need to make sure that we're telling our own narrative and we're we have our own ways of holding that. As veterans, we use our experience and our position as veterans. We're veteran status is privileged in this society, and we need to use that to make sure that we call out, politicians that use racial rhetoric in order to appease racist constituents.
Okay, that was a good point. I really wanted you to talk a little bit more about your work as a vet and the things that you have been doing against the hate also. And I think you tied it in a little bit, and we can expound on it here in a little bit. So Erica, you've been on the front lines fighting back on anti-immigrant sentiments. I want you to talk a little bit more about the tactics that you all do, and how you shut down immigration detention centers and stuff like that in Pennsylvania.
Well, I wanted to echo what Paige said. I think leadership development and having those most affected by the issue be at the front lines, I think, are valuable tools for doing this work. We have worked to shut down the ICE center here in Philadelphia through civil disobedience. We blocked them before. We trained community members in how to do it, so undocumented folks were at the lead of those things. We've been also fighting to shut down a family detention center here in Pennsylvania. It's called the Burke Family Detention Center. And a lot of that work has also been about working with the women on the inside who are detained. And so when they're leading a work strike because they're getting paid $1 a day, that we're there supporting them and taking their lead. And that we're also fighting back to make sure that we're ending all kinds of detention, that nobody deserves to be incarcerated or locked up in any kind of way, and really thinking about it as a full abolitionist movement. And most recently, we employed the tactic of interruption. When Hillary Clinton was in town just 2-3 weeks ago here in Philly for a town hall, and she talked about feminism, and it was asked by a white woman, and the response was very much around feminism that didn't really reflect all of the needs of our community. It was important for us to call out and say, well, what about the women and the Latino women that are locked up inside of Burke's? What about their lives? And it forced her to then respond and say that she has always been against family detention, which isn't necessarily true, but we have her on record. And so starting to really push those in power to respond to us in ways that we know they need to and they have to.
And so, Tess, are you still with us?
Yeah.
So, Tess, what were some of the things that you all did specifically in the Buy Anita campaign that you think were effective and you want to share with other people?
Yeah, so the Buy Anita campaign, we realized a month before Election Day that Anita Alvarez was winning, which to us was unacceptable. For those of you who don't know, Anita Alvarez, she covered up the murder of Laquan McDonald. She made it so Dante Servin, the officer who murdered Rakia Boyd, was unable to be found guilty because she botched his trial. She gives children, black children and brown children, max prison sentences. She criminalizes undocumented folks so that ICE can then find whatever bullshit justification to deport them. And so we thought it was really important for our communities as harm reduction, but she wasn't in office anymore. So we saw that she was winning, and we sat down. We devised a plan. We had a calendar of just different actions that we could do and communicate with each other in code, so that we can just do really rapidly respond to from interrupting her at funders dinners to doing train takeovers on the subway and distributing information about her and voter guides. We took advantage of there's a Trump rally here, and our city was the first to shut him down. And so we kind of took that moment when the UIC students had organized to shut down the Trump rally. We shut down an intersection and kind of uplifted by Trump, but also by Anita, and likened the two. And then finally, the culmination of this campaign, in which we did 17 actions, I think, in about a month period of direct action and interruption. We dropped 16 banners throughout the city, 16, of course, for the number of times Laquan was shot. Anything from Anita Alvarez doesn't care about Black people to We Heart Laquan, We Heart Rakia throughout the city. And then we were able to work with Color of Change to get a banner, 2 banners that flew over the city that day in planes that said, by Anita, by Hillary, I think was part of it. Chicago Hearts Laquan. And so we really just were creative in our tactic, and we were willing to try new things. But then the most important part of our messaging was that we were unapologetic and never endorsing Kim Foxx, who won the nomination, and unapologetic in saying that, you know, no state's attorney will ever be for our people, right? The person in charge of locking up Black and brown people in the state will never be for our people, but that the people have power in the city, especially the young queer Black people who led the Buy Anita work in that last month have power, and right now there are people who are hoarding that power, but it was really important for us to show the power that we have in basically firing Anita Alvarez.
Mm. Well, it was certainly quite effective. My brother's a principal in Chicago, and he was telling me about the way that Rahm was shut down with the students just yelling 16 shots until he left the building. It was quite impressive, the way that you all organized that, and it's certainly something that we can take away. And I don't know if we can buy banners or not like that, but we're gonna do what we can, I'm sure.
Well, we don't have money. We don't have a lot of money. But it's so
well, you worked it well, that's for sure. Y'all did a great job with that. So let's talk about calls to action right now. Well, where are we going from here, Erica? You talked a lot about that, you know, that the voting and stuff is not necessarily the answer for liberation for Latinos or for the people in general. So where do we go from here? Where you are going from here, and what sort of work are you doing, and what is your call to action now?
I mean, I think right now we have our local campaign, which is to shut down Berks. And you can follow the hashtag shut down Berks, and we have petitions. That's our local push. We've been able to get the license of that detention center revoked. So any support around that is definitely crucial, because I think, you know, if you think of detention and incarceration as a house full of bricks, whenever you can remove a brick, the house gets a little more unsteady. So any work that we can do to stop and to shut down all these detention centers, I think is valuable and important. And then I think it's an election year, and in Philly is the DNC, and so that will be happening here in 2 months. And I think you're going to see a lot of groups talking about mobilizing and voter registration, but I think it's also an opportunity to call out what does liberation look like, and what does it look like beyond the vote. Like, what does it mean for Latinos to be thinking beyond the vote? We're more than a vote. We're more than just a number or a political wedge issue. And what does it look like to have a large presence of people of color that are really thinking about the future of this country? So I would say if people are interested, let me know. We're here in Philly.
Well, I wanted to say to you, I thought it was rather courageous of you to make sure that you got your question out when Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton was being interviewed. So I wanted to give you big ups for that. I'm digging that. So I'm an elected official. My wife is. I don't know. I know that electoral politics is not the answer for. It's not the end all be all. So where are you guys going, Paige and Tess? How do you see moving beyond the elections? It doesn't seem like you guys are really focused on electoral politics anyway. So are you working around that or not?
I mean, yeah. So we have we organize. We disrupt every space that we can, right? And electoral politics is an important site that people pay attention to. And so given that, we have to show up and push people. And so, you know, this fall we're going to have, the budget will be up for debate, right? We're going to have a mayoral election next year. And Trump is interesting. You know, we're in a moment, Asada's daughters, Tess can speak more to this around, you know, building up authentic Black and brown solidarity and what that actually means. And engaging in Trump is like a easy way to do that, right? And I think we can build a lot of power, Black and brown power and solidarity power together. You know, we just came off of the Remember IKEA campaign. We have Dante Cervini. He finally did resign out of shame, but he's still getting his pension, even though he murdered Rekia Boyd. So there's people that have elected positions and people that work for the police department. You know, we seek to hold them accountable, and we seek to push people's imagination for what is possible. And so moving forward, we'll continue to do that. But long term, right, it's about the 6-year-olds and making sure that they understand the potential and the limitations of electoral politics.
Now, Tess, I know you're still driving and you hands-free, right?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so did you want to add something to that?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, all right. So Ramon, I thought this was an interesting piece. I wanted to save you for last on this one because as a veteran, it appears to me that you get heavily inundated with um, uh, the what do you call it? Not the patriarchy, but yeah, I guess that's what it is. But you know, you get inundated with being an American. You know, you're not un-American if you don't vote and if you don't participate in all these different things. So I wanted you to, how do you move beyond the electoral politics and what are the veterans doing outside of electoral politics?
Well, veterans, we have, initiatives that, not only veterans, but, the different veteran organizations that are coming together to try and build, actual solidarity and build actual connections with, say, with the Muslim community or with the Black community to show that, using that, that privilege that we're afforded within society to, build initiatives, when it comes to electoral politics, the Veterans versus Hate hashtag that we created, and where veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan are pushing back against the fear-mongering and the xenophobic rhetoric of politicians to address foreign policy outside of electoral politics, because once the elections are over, the campaigns overseas are still going on. There's still these communities are being decimated by our military, and we need to address that. And hoping that by us standing up and addressing those issues, that fellow veterans will see and begin to reject that kind of idea that somehow it's us versus them, binary kind of thing. Where also I'm a part-time organizer with veterans combating Islamophobia. I have a unique position being both a veteran and a Muslim. But here in Dallas, I've been trying to forge kind of a community that's working across different lines, whether it be social, class, or economic or racial, to address racism that's going on. Here in Dallas, we've had 3 armed protests of mosques, and we've tried to make sure that we address that racism that's coming into our community. We recently had a counter demonstration in Houston where there was this hate group that was protesting a Dawah center. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because once this campaign's over, as I said, the elections only showed just how racist this society is, and made it more visible for people to interact with. And now, hopefully, now that people see just how racist this society is, that we continue to work together to build a power within our community to address, that Black lives truly do matter, and the fact that we all need to be treated with dignity and with respect. It doesn't matter who the next president is, because we're still going to have to continue fighting for our lives once this election's over.
So, I guess we're going to kind of open it up for some. I have a general question. So, how do we build authentic Black and brown solidarity? So, how do Erica and Tess build Black and brown solidarity from Philly to Chicago? Tess, Erica, one of y'all jump in. Go for it.
Okay. Go ahead, Tess. You go first.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry, it started pouring, so it's kind of loud. But so in Asada's Daughters, we've been working a lot with OCAD, Organized Communities Against Deportation. Sorry, pouring. And one way that we've been trying to practice solidarity, Paige said once that solidarity is a verb. So it's something we're learning to do, and it's something that we're practicing with the understanding that our experiences as a black person with citizenship, whatever that means, is going to be different than a undocumented Latino person living in Chicago, right? Like, our experiences are different, but we've been trying to build a lot of unity against enforcement, so whether that's through the enforcement of ICE or by the CTV. And so we've been organizing United in Our Abolitionist Politics, but with a deep understanding and a deep goal to learn from one another the ways in which our oppression is different and the ways in which that it's linked, right? The ways in which we can explore anti-Blackness in the Latino community, but with the ultimate goal of we all want to get free.
Yeah, I agree, Tess. And we work really closely with OCAD through Mi Gente and Not One More. So we really love all the work that they're doing out there with you guys. We watch it from over here. And a lot of the work that we've done locally with Juntos has also been around policing, enforcement, deportation issues, and also doing youth work. So we do youth organizing also here in Juntos. And our young people have worked a lot with young people from the Philadelphia Student Union. And most recently, there was a case of police brutality inside of one of our high schools. And we're talking about just like divestment of policing inside of our schools and trying to really work with our young people to think about solutions around those issues. And also, I think for us in Philly, like our base is Latinos, but it's also Afro-Latinos, and having some of the conversations inside of the community that have been around historically what has happened in our own home countries that have created also Blackness for generations, and starting to unpack that also internally inside of the organization.
So, Ramon, we had a question that came in from DC for you. So how important is it to address pre-existing wedges as part of your work to lift up alternative narratives? So they talk about the IVAW did the Right to Heal campaign and collected stories from Iraq vets and Iraqi civilians on their experiences with PTSD after the war. And it was powerful work. Can you share more about the campaign and the power behind bringing these two groups together?
So that's right. Bringing the two communities together. You mean veterans and the communities that have been affected by militarism? That what it was?
Yes. That's the base of the gist of the question.
Okay. Yeah. So within the society, veterans are always being because we're on that pedestal, but then there's always talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the issues that veterans are dealing with here in the United States. But too often we as a society, kind of out of sight, out of mind, we forget about what's happening in Iraq and what's happening in Afghanistan and all the other communities that we've affected. You have high levels of disease and kind of and contamination that's been going on in Iraq and Fallujah. So what we try and do is we try and create a space for support for the Iraqi and Afghan communities to tell their stories, to give them the assistance that they need in order to make sure that they're able to rebuild the country that we ultimately destroyed. Allowing the conversations to create conversations. Then we're able to kind of build that true solidarity, because we can always say that, hey, what happened in Iraq and what happened in Afghanistan is wrong, and we're not a part of it. We can say it all we want, but we actually have to make sure that we're connecting with those communities, connecting with the communities here in Dallas that are from Iraq and from Afghanistan, to making sure that they're not forgotten. Just recently there was here in Dallas last year. Ahmed Al-Jumaili was killed. He was killed, with his first snowfall. He had only been here 20 days. So he was an Iraqi refugee that survived the occupation, the invasion, the occupation, and then came and was ultimately was shot and killed here in Dallas. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed as well. The fact, where are these refugee communities? Are they being supported once they come in, or they are being put up in a city where they have no idea what's going on? They don't know the routines. They don't know the areas that they're in, that then ultimately can be victimized. So, trying to do that is what we're trying to do. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I can think of.
Okay. So we have questions coming in from all across the country. We have Luke in Oakland. He says the cultural strategies and tactics. When we talk about narrative, we're also talking about culture that we interface with. What role does cultural organizing play in your work? What role does culture play into creating alternative narratives? Can you give a specific example? So Paige, how about you take that one?
So I think there's a lot of different cultures, right, in the world, and I think the dangers I have with when I hear people talk about cultural organizing is like that can very quickly fall into like tokenization and appropriation. And so I organize from an authentic place. And the moment I saw Beyonce's Formation video, I was like, there's got to be an action that like builds on this, that taps into that mainstream thing. And so around Remember IKEA stuff, we organized the NFL draft happens here. They call it Draft Town, and so that happens here in Chicago. And so we did a shutdown of Lakeshore Drive right outside of Draft Town, and we appropriated the imagery of it. We didn't actually shut down Draft Town. We were shutting down more the city and its ability to go to Draft Town. And use that imagery, but we did it around saying like, don't pay Dante Servin, right? And instead save Chicago State University. Like, first of all, when you think about the priorities of the city, where they could be charging the NFL the actual amount that they would charge anyone else, and it would be a lot of it would be enough money to keep CSU going for like a couple more weeks. And so we were protesting that, but we did so in a way that we were dressed up like Beyonce's halftime show. And so we have all of these Black women identified people shutting down Lakeshore Drive in all Black, right, with like imagery that taps into that cultural phenomenon, and then I think expanded it, right? Like Beyonce's that halftime show could have just been a halftime show, but now it means something more, at least to me. Like it means Black women taking up space, Black women disrupting in spaces that they're not expected to, and all of the Black women as a blockade, we were chained together, and so we demanded, like, in order to arrest us, the cops had to break the chains that held us there. And there was a lot of symbolism, right? And optics are important, and tapping into, things that are pop culture, things that are cultural, can put your narrative into a river that feeds through a lot more people than if you were just trying to like be the radical person in the room. And so I think it's important and it's useful, but also like take people seriously and people. A lot of Black people, like, for me, like, I don't need to convince Black people that the police are messed up. Like, that's not, like, what cultural organizing that I need to do, right? It's more like, how can we show that, for me, that action was about, like, Black women are powerful, right? And that when that halftime performance was more than just, like, a spectacle, like an entertainment moment. It has power behind it.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
And
I
we
was
had an
watching the game.
That was cool.
I was watching the game myself, and some people were focused on other optics. I immediately caught that it was a Black Panther reference. I was dealing with my own sexism, and I saw the radicalness in it and the power of the Black women. So I just wanted to give myself some props right there. Erica, you were nodding though when we posed this question. What would you say to that?
I mean, I think that we couldn't do the work that we do in immigrant rights organizing without having a deep connection to our cultural roots. I think that time and time again, I think this country tries to like whitewash us and have a total erasure of what our culture is. And so we operate with music. There's Son Jarocho that happens out of here in the Junto space. There are classes. Each of our actions have an arts component to it. We use imagery that is connected to our community. And I think it's because we do intergenerational work, it also becomes how are we talking about all the cultures that we bring with us as Latinos from all of the different countries, but also what does it mean to be a first generation, either a young immigrant who came as a child or also somebody who is first generation, was born here, and it's different, and that's okay, and that we need to start building the bridges so that's not one is better than the other, but that we're kind of holding up all of that. So our actions include lots of art, lots of music, all of our events include lots of food. So I think it's about, and it's also about, it's rooted in family. And so a lot of that is about making sure that there's a sense of family that exists here, and that's very cultural to us too.
So we are getting close to the end here, and so just wanted to give each one of you a chance to say, when we think about liberation and what that looks like to you, how do you say that in the most succinct fashion as possible, right? We got about 5-6 minutes left, and why don't we just go with Tess and move down no, let's start with Ramon. Let's start with Ramon, and then we'll move down the line.
You know, as let's make sure if you hear me. Okay, as for me, liberation is one that's collective. You know, collective liberation. The idea that if if you're not free, then I'm not free, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that making sure that the person who's being oppressed, who's being not allowed to flourish within the society, then I'm going to work as hard as I can to support the fact that they are able to liberate themselves, and liberate. In that process, I'm also able to liberate myself. Utopia is not a fantasy. It's a direction that we're going towards, and we can reach it when we work together and when we address the issues of our society collectively as one voice, not allowing the marginalization or disenfranchisement of any community. So that's what liberation means to me.
Okay. Tess, what about you? She's still there? I think she got caught in the rain. It must be raining pretty good there in Chicago. So, Paige, what about you?
I don't know, and I don't have to know that the world isn't good enough. I will say I think it involves something, at least some level of, like, people should be allowed to be mediocre and be able to live, right? People should be allowed to mess up. Freedom involves being able to fail. It doesn't mean we're perfect and that we don't hurt each other, but it doesn't mean that it costs you your life or your dignity or your self-respect.
Okay. Erica?
I think Ramon and Paige have said beautiful things. I want to echo none of us are perfect, and that there should be room for error and elevating all of us and creating a sense of family. And liberation means that exactly if one of us isn't free, then none of us are free. And so really looking out to our community and really thinking about how we're thinking about all of us and moving forward. And I don't know if we'll get liberation in our lifetime, but I like to think that we've all been working towards it.
All right, so I got to say that I didn't expect you all to be that succinct. So we've still got like a few more minutes to slip another question in. Why don't you then what is it that you have learned, Paige, from all of this work that you've been doing? What is something that when you talk to that 6-year-old, what is it that you share with them that that you want to say, hey, I got this and I want to give it to them?
I think one of the most important things that I've learned that I try to communicate with everyone I interact with is, like, you don't have to have the right answers. There's this expression that someone told me, like, we're not trying to be right, we're trying to get free. And the big part of getting free means you're always asking questions. Like, I tell my students, like, I don't trust people that don't ask questions. Doesn't mean I trust a lot of people that I think are wrong, but they're asking good questions, and they're committed to better understanding and learning. And so I think that's a big part of it, is like people, the ways that social change has been narrated by the status quo can be really disempowering. The way that MLK even is narrated, which is first of all inaccurate, but also quite dangerous. And you don't have to have like every skill, and you don't have to be, know how to communicate all the things to every person, but do what you can where you are as best as you know how. And tomorrow say do better. I'm gonna do better tomorrow, and that means you're gonna have to study, right? It means you're gonna have to reflect, and it means you're gonna have to take action without knowing exactly what you're doing, and that you're gonna mess up, and that is organizing. Organizing is like is a commitment to failure, right? And doing better on some level at least.
So Ramon,
and that Black women are awesome.
Ramon, So to this white working class guy that bumps into you in the street and is buying into this Trump rhetoric, what's your conversation with him?
My conversation with him is to be open-minded. You know, to come with me. I'll show you what and who Muslims are. I think that that's one thing that I learned from being a veteran, is that I didn't know anything. You know, we were told that these people are the enemy and this is what they're doing and we have to go and stop them, right? That's what I was told when I was, 20 years old in the Marine Corps. You know, I joined the Marine Corps not to defend my country. I joined to support my family. I was married in high school and I had a daughter and I needed to support my family. And, I'm part of the economic draft where I went and, served in the Marine Corps for a steady paycheck. So when I went overseas, I didn't know anything about Muslims. I didn't know anything about Islam. But the minute that I started to actually learn about who Muslims were and what they believed in, then that led a process for me to actually understand that I was being lied to the entire time. And that's something that the white working class or white middle class doesn't understand, is that they're being lied to and they're pointing the finger for everything that's going wrong in their lives at the wrong direction. And the minute that they allow themselves to be vulnerable, to be educated, to learn and sit down and speak to real Muslims and not what they see on TV and what they see in movies, then maybe they'll be learning to accept the community that's been here, since the beginning of the United States.
So, Erica, I'm going to have to wrap this up. I'm sorry, but I thought that was a wonderful note to end on, Brother Ramon. It has been my pleasure to host this, and I'm going to turn it over to Angela. Before I go, I'm going to say this. In a world full of hate, then love is a revolution. I really, really appreciate talking to all of you all, and I hope we get a chance to organize together. And Angela, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. And honestly, Aaron, thank you so much for being our fantastic host, like usual. Amazing, perspectives were shared by Paige, Tess, Ramon, and Erica. For those of you who are on the call, their contact information is listed right here on this slide. So if you want to continue the dialogue, visit them on Twitter, visit the hashtag MediaJustice, or use their email address here. Just a few reminders for folks: when you log off from this webinar, you will receive an immediate pop-up window asking you to give us some feedback on how this webinar went. All of your feedback is always really helpful for all of us as we continue to improve how we host these webinars. So please make sure to take just a minute to fill out that survey and to submit. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please be on the lookout for our next Media Justice Salon, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all. Bye, y'all.
Debbie texted, said you, yeah, just finished, but I have to call Barbara.